The Department of English at Missouri State University presents Let's Read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Fitt 2. In Fitt 2 of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, as you might recall, Gawain tarries for a little bit in King Arthur's court until Michaelmas, when he is then armed, equipped, and sent on his quest. We are given an extensive description of his armor, and specifically of his shield, which has a 5-pointed pentangle on it, which didn't have necessarily occult associations in the Middle Ages, although it was associated with the Temple of Solomon and the Seal of Solomon, who was also often given magic power in books on magic from the Middle Ages, which is where the association between the 5-pointed pentangle and magic come from. But here the author assigns a number of different associations to the 5 points of the pentangle, which he associates specifically with Gawain. Let's have a look. First, he was judged perfect in his 5 senses, and next, his 5 fingers never lost their dexterity. That's first group of 5, second group of 5. And all his earthly faith was in the 5 wounds that Christ suffered on the cross, as the Creed declares. And wherever this man found himself in battle, his fixed thought was that, above all other things, all his fortitude should come from the 5 joys that the mild Queen of Heaven found in her child. That is, of course, Mary. There's a lot about medieval Catholicism and medieval Christianity in here. One thing is that medieval people, like BuzzFeed readers in 2010 or so, loved lists. They loved making lists of things. Scholastic philosophy is full of lists, and they like to organize things. They were also very interested in numbers and in the significance of numbers, the kind of semantic power of numbers, not mathematically, but what we might say numerologically. That is, what do numbers mean? Of course, 3 has associations with the Trinity. 4 has associations with completion, right? The 4 corners of a building, the 4 cardinal directions. 4 is associated with the earth and the world and creation. And 5 is associated often with humanity, because you have the 4 elements associated with the 5th element, or what we might call a 5th element, which is soul or spirit. And so 5 is associated with mortal man, as Tolkien might have put it. And so Gawain's symbol is the symbol of humanity. So we have these 4 5s, and then there's the 5th 5, a 5th group of 5, because we have 5 times 5 here. 1 5 is the senses, the second 5 is the fingers, right? He's a great warrior, he's a good knight, he's full of prowess, I think is the word that is used in the Middle English text, which is a funny one, because prowess actually comes from an old French word meaning to be proven, to be tried and true, to be like a veteran. And one thing we learned from Fitt 1 is that supposedly he doesn't have any provenness yet. So there's some incoherences in this text that might strike a modern editor as flaws. But I think they were after different kinds of truths in a text like this. So there's the 5 wounds of Christ, the 5 joys of Mary, and then we have the 5 courtly virtues of Gawain. So anyway, the Queen of Heaven is inside her. The Queen of Heaven, Mary? Her image is inside his shield, so that he can look at it if his heart ever quails. The 5th group of 5, the man respected, I hear, was generosity and love of fellow men above all. Fellowship is the word that's used in the Middle English, though it's spelled somewhat differently. His purity and courtesy were never lacking. So generosity and love of fellow men. Generosity, fellowship, purity, courtesy, and surpassing the others, compassion. These noble 5 were more deeply implanted in that man than any other, And the narrator tells us this, so I don't think we have any reason not to believe him. I don't know if they had invented the unreliable narrator in at this time. Chaucer will do that, but he makes his unreliable narrator characters, as we'll see in week 4. Now, truly, all these 5 groups were embodied in that night, each one linked to the others in an endless design, based upon 5 points that were never unfinished. That was never unfinished, not uniting in one line nor separating either, without ending anywhere at any point that I find, no matter where the line began or ran to an end. Therefore the knot was fashioned on his bright shield, royally with red gold upon red gules, that is called the true pentangle by learned people who know. Now Gawain, lance in hand, is ready to depart. He bade them all farewell, not to return he thought. Now, this symbol here is given a lot of attention and a lot of significance. And these 5 traits, these 5 virtues, generosity, fellowship, purity, courtesy, these 4 ones are, and compassion, they're going to be tested. These are the things that he's going to find tested. And the different qualities that he has are going to be tested in different ways. And in some ways, in order to uphold one virtue, he might have to sacrifice another. Courtesy, for example, calls on him to behave in specific ways to women, to be obedient, to be their servant, to do as they ask him. Purity may require that sometimes that he does not do what they ask him if they ask him to sacrifice that. Courtesy and love of fellow men might come into conflict if, for example, a woman asks him to keep a secret from a fellow man when he has sworn an oath not to keep any secrets with that fellow man. Generosity is the opposite of avarice. And avarice is I want you to look out for avarice as something that comes up, especially in Fitt 4, in Gawain's own speech after the denouement, or the final revelation in this text. I think this is enough about this text right now to set us up, but the other thing that I want to say about this is that this is a text, that is to say, this is a narrative poem where symbols matter. It is full of symbolism. Things signify. The pentangle signifies, the Virgin Mary signifies, the castle that he encounters signifies, clothing, items, animals, and people, including Gawain himself. He seems to come to Bertilac's castle after his journey through the wilderness in Fitt 2, freighted with a pre-existing significance. Let's have a look. It's sort of an amusing thing that after Gawain gets armored up, sent on his way, travels through all kinds of wilderness and cold, and he shivers and he prays to be delivered, and he fights giants and monsters, which is all kind of presented to us by the poet in a kind of fast-forwarded montage. He finally arrives at this big old castle in the middle of nowhere, and is greeted. And the first thing that happens is that all this armor is taken off of him. And he is taken into this big fancy castle, and he's greeted like a cherished guest. And this kind of hospitality for somebody who is from the upper class would not have been strange in itself in the Middle Ages. In a world before Hotels.com, hospitality was something that was a sacred obligation that goes back to the classical world. So here he is. All these people in this castle greet him, and they say, and it says, then he was tactfully, then he was tactfully questioned and asked by discreet inquiry addressed to that prince, so that he must politely admit he belonged to the court which noble Arthur, that gracious man, rules alone, who is the great and royal king of the Round Table, and that it was Gawain himself who was sitting there, having arrived there at Christmas as his fortune chanced. When the lord of the castle heard who was his guest, He laughed loudly at the news, so deeply was he pleased, and all the men in the castle were overjoyed to make the acquaintance quickly then of the man to whom all excellence and valor belongs, whose refined manners are everywhere praised, and whose fame exceeds any other person's on earth. Wow, that's a little bit different than I'm the most worthless knight you have, Arthur, send me. Each knight whispered to his companion, now we shall enjoy seeing... Wait, what? What are we going to enjoy seeing from this knight? Displays of good manners. How exciting. And the irreproachable terms of noble speech. The art of conversation we can learn unasked, since we have taken in the source of good breeding. Truly, God has been gracious to us indeed in allowing us to receive such a guest as Gawain, whose birth men will happily sit down and celebrate in song. In knowledge of fine manners, this man is expertise. I think that those who hear him will learn what love talk is. Love talk is actually what it says in the Middle English. Now this is bizarre. They're really, oh wow, this really great brave knight is here. He's gonna talk real good. This is bizarre, right? And so it gives us a sense of what is actually going to be tested in Gawain. It is not his prowess as a warrior, but as a courtier, as somebody, as, you know, we talked in last week about chivalric romance as being part of this civilizing process of cultivating a kind of controlled, composed masculinity and selfhood in knighthood. And here we see that being put to the test, and it will combine with the various virtues that he's supposed to exemplify that we saw in the previous passage in this video. But one thing is worth mentioning here, given that this is a late romance, a sophisticated romance, a romance that has some degree of awareness of the fact that it is a text, and it's a text in a tradition. Gawain is associated in this text with the five-pointed pentacle, right? Which I said is associated with humanity, the interpenetration of the spiritual and the material. But he's so human in earlier versions of Arthuriana. For example, the Vulgate Grail, the Lancelot Grail cycle. At a certain point in King Arthur's reign, much later than the one described here, they will be given the Grail quest. And the Grail quest involves a kind of religious pilgrimage, a holy journey, where various knights will fail or be tempted or fall off the quest at some point. The whole thing is a spiritual allegory. It was written by monks, Carthusian monks, I think, or Cistercians. It doesn't matter. Everyone will fall off except for Galahad and maybe like Sir Bors, I think, the ones who are the most spiritually pure. Galahad is a virgin, right? He's never had sex, and this is important. Very, very physical chastity is super associated with spiritual purity in the Middle Ages in a way that even modern sort of evangelical purity culture doesn't touch, right? It doesn't have the idea that chastity is superior to a married state. So everyone will fall off eventually. Lancelot will get so far, but his own sins with Guinevere will prevent him from completing the Grail quest. Gawain, on the Grail quest, he doesn't even get started. He's just out right away. He's like me playing Mario Kart. As soon as I leave the starting line, I'm like turned around, driving into a wall. Like, how do I even get there? He's a player. He is, as we used to say in the 90s, a Mac. Gawain is a character who is, in traditional sources, not associated with purity. He's a womanizer. And someone who's actually can be kind of mean to women. I think there's one story in some of the traditional Gawain where he has to go on a quest because he strikes a woman and therefore has to sort of make amends for that. So it's very clear that the way that our author has been setting this up, that he's been doing a kind of what you might call a hard reboot of Arthuriana here, that this Gawain is, as he's been presented to us so far, is not the Gawain that we have if we are familiar with the universe, with the genre, should be led to expect. They greet him and they say, "Oh, hey, it's Gawain. He's going to talk to us about noble talking and love talking." It seems that maybe they're familiar with these characters in this story are more familiar with Gawain the character than Gawain the person in the same fictional level with them who's coming to meet them. So there's a kind of almost postmodern metatextual thing going on here. Perhaps. I don't know. Let me know if you disagree in the discussion boards. I look forward to talking to you about this.